Dave Scott, Hub Media. It's the Bobbi and Brady show. That's MPP Bobbi and Brady from Hallam, Norfolk. We haven't chatted in a while. It's great to see you. I know you've been busy with the fair. I know you've been busy with all this other stuff. To get this underway, I went down a rabbit hole the other day, and I really want to get your take on this because it bugged me so much. The September 24th quote by the Premier about homelessness. I don't know why it got me. It just hit me hard, and I was like, frustrated. So again, I got a few statistics that I want to share with you. But first of all, when you heard that, what was your feelings? What was your feedback?
Like a lot of people, I guess I just felt like the Premier was out of touch with, what's really going on in this province. And my mind immediately went to the fact that, okay, number one, we don't have the necessary supports in place right now for somebody who does want to kind of escape that cycle of dependency. You need a fixed address. You need all sorts of things in order to actually get out there and do some of these things. Listen, I'm the first person. I'm a conservative in the fact that, I think everybody feels fulfilled when they are being productive and when they are working. But there's a better approach to, what the Premier did. And then secondly, where my mind went is to the working poor. I am hearing more and more from families who are struggling. They're making, decent money, but they're spending it on things beyond their control. Everything has gone through the roof, and they are really struggling. They're sad. They're disheartened. So that's where my mind went to this guy who is standing there saying, like, making it sound so easy. And we have taught, I was taught that if you work hard, you'll be okay. People are working hard in this province and they're not okay, Dave. And so that's where my mind went. I thought, this guy, he is really out of touch with what's going on. He's out of touch with people who are living paycheck to paycheck or who are cutting back on food in order to put gas in their vehicle to go make money. There was so much to unpack in that quote of his. And I am sure that it's going to be front and center when we return October 21st.
And it seemed like the part that got me is, so I started, like I said, down that rabbit hole. 2018, 21,000 folks were homelessness in the province. An unofficial count as of 2024 was 224,000. Like, that is an incredible number when you start thinking, I know we came through a pandemic, I know all that. And to me, it's like, like we should have started years ago addressing this, but obviously it hasn't happened. So
we should have. And what I have noticed, what I have witnessed is we have a government who says, oh, we're trying to fix the problem. And they just throw money at it willy-nilly.
Yeah, I agree.
There's no accountability to where that money's going. Case in point, locally, we've received somewhere between $4 and $6 million to deal with homelessness. And yet we see that exacerbating on our streets locally. We still see people who are, as we head into winter, who are living on the streets. And so where is the accountability of where that money is going to? And, I had this discussion with somebody yesterday that I met with. Outcomes are not, hey, we passed 500 people through, this checkpoint. Outcomes are those people actually doing better? So we're spending money and we're saying, oh yeah, this is what we're doing with it. And we've looked at so many people this year. Well, what's happening with those people? So there's no accountability for outcomes in this province. And that really bothers me. We did a lot of work on this when I worked for Toby. We did a white paper under Tim Hudak, and Toby was the critic for social services at the time. And we based that white paper on outcomes. So if you're going to pledge this amount of money for a problem, then what are the outcomes? What we need value for money, and we are not getting value for money on this file in this province right now. There are a number of communities who are doing some good things. Peterborough, for example. I was in Peterborough 2 years ago for finance committee, and I've told this story multiple times, I think, on this podcast, where I cried. I was 3 minutes from my hotel to the meeting room, and on every single corner in the downtown, there was something really terrible going on, an encampment, drugs being handed out on one corner. I just thought to myself, how did we get to this point? Well, Peterborough, all pulled together, broke down the silos, and is actually getting the job done. I think they just won an award at AMO for dealing with homelessness. And so, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to look at what is working elsewhere, whether it's here, whether it's somewhere in Canada, around the world. We need to look at what's working and just get it done and make sure that we're getting the value for the money and that we are turning the lives of people around. So, like I say, I could go on and on about this one for a while, but I think one of the key things in this file, in many files actually, is the silo building. There's a lot of people who, we're working on this problem because we feel so horrible about it. Well, are you working with the other people down the road who also feel terrible about it and want to see things? So we need to break down those silos, and we've got to get everybody on one page and pulling in the same direction, not fighting for those monies that the government is handing out to deal with a problem. We need to pool our resources and all be on the same page.
I believe they call that empire building.
Empire building. Oh yeah, it's happened far too much in this province.
I'm glad you brought up the numbers, because that was one of the things that I looked into too. Province of Ontario takes in $4.2 billion in income and alcohol sales every year. 2.5 of that goes back into public services. The cost related to alcohol, what it does in the community, how the effect is we're looking at $7 billion, healthcare and the justice system alone. So that, even if you took all that money's out, you're still running at a deficit of $2 billion. Right there, that tells me, that's, to me, you want to be a better budget, then we need to look at this problem in a larger sense. And so, like you talked about around the world, and I went down, like I said, I went down the hole. So Finland has housing first policy that started in 2008. They eradicated 68% of homelessness. 68%.
Yep.
And the other part of this that we don't talk about is 60%, roughly 60% of the folks in Ontario that are homelessness are either dealing with a mental health issue or an alcohol issue. It's right there in front of us. We're creating our own problem that way. We need to be more responsible as a community. Just like you said, I love the idea of not building silos. And I think the Finland, the housing first policy, if anybody looks it up, it's really good. It's really cool the way they did this.
I wrote about that model some time ago, and they discovered that, if housing is in place, then everything else can fall into place a lot easier. Without housing, you have no address, as I was saying in the beginning when we were talking about Doug Ford's comment. Without housing, you have no fixed address. It's really hard to actually fill out any paperwork and try to be productive. And, I know that people will say, well, that's just an excuse. No, that's the way the red tape and the bureaucracy works in this country right now. You just can't get a paycheck handed to you. You actually have to have a fixed address. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Places like Finland have it figured out. And we just have to channel our monies and and stop this whole, who's actually going to get the job done. We can just pool our resources, get the job done. The recipe's already there. And
I think Mr. Ford, if you're listening, which he probably does, I mean, this is a great show. Don't just if you haven't looked at it, it's worth it. It definitely gives us an alternative to the problem that's at hand. And I kind of looked at it too. I thought, on your darkest days in your life, it's always nice to go home and have a hot meal. Yeah. Right? When life's dealing you crap all day, and it's just nice to be at home and enjoy that. And I think that's, I agree with you 100%. When you start that foundation over again, and like they did in Finland, it provides that opportunity for people to grow. And when we're spending $7 billion on healthcare and the justice system, that's not money well spent.
And I'm afraid that the problem, unless we start doing, taking some very definitive action, it's going to exacerbate. And keep in mind, as a conservative, one of the things that we often thought of is that people on the street were there by choice, that they were addicts, they were users of something, and that is not always the case these days. There are a lot of folks on the street who are not addicted, but have fallen on bad times and have nowhere else to go. I've spoken to some of them. And so, I know there'll be some people listening who are like, no, like we can't help those people who are choosing to, kind of destroy their own lives. But there's a cadre of people out there who are just down on their luck and have nowhere to go because they can't afford rent. They can't afford anything else. And they're on the street. And what we're doing right now is not working. It is not humane. And I think it's only going to get worse.
I think too, to add to that comment, because I like what you said there about, that's their choice. In a lot of cases, it's not.
No.
In a lot of cases, they could have been abused. There could have been trauma in their family. There could have been a split family. There's so many other factors that have maybe moved through their life that led them to this point. And I don't think I don't care what you think, no one deserves that. Especially
Nobody wakes up.
We're not doing enough on the education prevention and at the younger age.
We have to get in at the younger age. And nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I want to be an addict. Right. And I guess from a mom's perspective, my view on this probably really changed when I became a parent. And when I see young people, for example, there was one that really caught my attention last year when I was driving into Queen's Park, and it was right on the corner of Front Street in the Gardner. And young girl, and she had her back to me, cute short haircut. She had a little skirt on. She looked really good until she turned around, and you could tell that she had been using for a long time. She then handed her boyfriend, or whoever the guy was, on the ground below her, a needle, and he shot up right there in front of me. And I just wanted to get out of my car and shake them and say, like, what are you doing? Like, this is somebody's baby. This is somebody's child. And how did things get so bad? How did that life get so sad that that's what they're doing, right?
Yeah, and I get that we can't save everyone. I understand that, but we're not even. I think we, as a community, as a country, we got to try and help. We've got to try
and save those people who really want the help, right? Yeah. And there are people out there that if we strike at the right moment, we can get them that help, and they can turn things around. It's about striking at that right time.
Well, and I relate it in a different way to you, because how many times do you get pushed down, but you get back up? And there's times, you and I have talked, there's times both of us feel that we just don't want to get back up. We've had enough, right? But you find a way. And we got to provide that opportunity to these folks to say, hey, it's okay, get back up. We're here for you.
In the dojo that I train in, there's a poster, knock down 9 times, you get up 10.
Exactly.
I always like that one. Yeah.
The great chalk on that. I do appreciate it. And I do think there's more. You and I will have these discussions again, because I do think people appreciate that when we go in a little more depth on this and sort of look at, again, when you step it back and look at maybe where that child started. I think that's, folks, always keep that in the back of your mind. When you see somebody that's homelessness, or you see somebody struggling with life, there's probably something way back there that's still affecting them today. And that's where you can help.
Yeah. And that's a good point, Dave, because, we've all got baggage. We all have things in our past that we may not be proud of, that were not shining moments. But for most of us, those moments were a heck of a lot shinier than, some of these folks that we see on the street. They may have never had a shiny moment, right? And we just never know. I always say to my kids, You just don't know what someone's story is unless you
Yeah,
ask.
exactly.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask this too, because this came across my desk the other day, and I wanted to ask you, get your thoughts on this real quick, and we'll move on. But Jeffrey Hinton won the Nobel Prize in Physics, University of T professor, physics, and he wanted to donate $1 million to help get it started in fixing the Science Center. Obviously, this is his love and his passion. That kind of was like, yeah, man, cool. Like, but I know the Ford government's already said, no, we're not fixing this. But shouldn't that be open to the community to decide? Like, I'm just curious. Can we raise that money?
Yeah, there's a board of directors who should have a say, right? And there was some legislation that came before committee before I was kicked off a committee on that. And
that's another story.
Right, that's another story. But it was about when we were dissecting the legislation, it appeared to me that like we were trying to strip some of these boards of their abilities. And so I go back to the idea of, 2 years ago when the premier came in and appointed a PC candidate to run in the election, I said, how do I, as the president of the local association, continue to retain and attract members when the single most important decision they can make every few years is taken out of their hands? And it's the same with respect to, a place like the Science Center. There is a board that gives of their time, volunteers their time, raises money, and then they have no say in what's going on. And, we've all known sitting in the Ontario legislature that this has all been a preconceived notion. So I think that somebody could come forward and say they were going to pay for the whole thing and it wouldn't matter.
Really? Well, I think that's, I just remember going as a kid and loved it.
Absolutely.
And again, back to our kids.
And I ran into at opening day of the fair, I ran into a gentleman who was visiting from Toronto, and I won't say who he was representing because that might get him in trouble. But he even said to me, he said, he says, Bobbi, and I'm really confused why everything has to be so downtown Toronto centric.
Yeah.
And that was a Toronto guy.
He's right. He's right.
Yep.
I did like a column. I like all your columns, but this one kind of hit me, and I wanted to expand on it. Till death do us part. I thought that was very well written, very well done. But I want you to explain that to the folks if they don't know what this is about, because it pissed me off too.
Yeah, so it's probably one of my columns that has received the most attention, and I think for a few reasons. Number one, because I'm writing about somebody else's idea. It's a private member's bill that was brought forward by my colleague on the NDP side, Catherine Fife. And I've talked about Catherine a few times on this podcast. We work well together. We don't always see eye to eye on issues, but we work very well together and we share, information. But I caught on her Instagram feed some time ago, a little clip that said, 680 days or something like that. This bill has been at committee and the government, just lets it sit idle. And I was really frustrated by that because I've sat on a few different committees. I know how committee works. I'm also frustrated by the idea that there seems to be a monopoly on a good idea at Queen's Park. Catherine's bill, Till Death Do Us Part, is about seniors when they go into long-term care being separated. Right now, there is no forcing or there's no guarantee that if a husband and wife go into long-term care together, that they're going to remain together. And that breaks my heart. And I've had so many families come up to me at the fair or write in since the column was released saying, oh my goodness, this happened to our family. Mom and dad were separated. Their mental health declines. Their health in general declines. It's just heartbreaking, right? There's no reason for it. And if there is a reason for it, as I said in my column, then my goodness, Mr. Government, let's actually have the experts come in to committee and testify and tell us why this can't be done in this province. If we can't find experts to say that this can't be done in our province, then let's just get it done. But they don't bring it forward. Nearly 700 days now, sitting on the committee docket, waiting to be brought forward. If an election's called, that falls off the order paper and we start all over again for these families.
Yeah, that's way too long.
It's way too long.
It doesn't, I mean, I don't know how the system works in that aspect of it, but I mean, if it's going to a committee that has to review it, just review it. Well, it doesn't sound like it's a monster bill here.
No. And just for your knowledge and for those listening's knowledge, when the government brings forward a bill and it's referred to committee, we look at it right away. It's passed right away. So it goes through committee. We spend a few days having public hearings, this, that, and the other. We go through, we're given maybe 18 hours notice for amendments. None of the amendments are ever adopted. And then it goes back to the House for third reading and passage. So, it can be done because it's being done on a daily basis at Queen's Park for the government's legislation. But here's an example of a piece of legislation that's really good for the people of Ontario, as far as I can see. And if I'm wrong, then at least bring in the professionals and the experts to tell us we're wrong and tell us why we can't do this in this province. No, they're just blocking it. And I'll go back. I talked about this other one as well. A few months back, Stephen Blaise from Ottawa, my colleague on the Liberal side, brought forward probably one of the most conservative private members' bills that the House will see in this run. And it was defeated. It was defeated by only the conservative members. It was a very conservative idea. It was about giving parents a tax credit for extracurriculars,
$500, wasn't it?
Piano lens. Yeah. It wasn't a handout. It was a hand up to families in a really difficult time. It's a conservative idea. It should have been a no-brainer. But because it wasn't their idea, we don't pass it. And the same with Catherine's bill. And that's the part that makes me so excited about being an independent, is because I don't care whose idea it is. If it's good for the people of Haldom and Norfolk, if it's good for the people of Ontario, my goodness, let's get it done.
Well said. And I think that's, I liked the concept that maybe with this session coming up in the House, that maybe a few more things will be exposed. Maybe people can sort of understand what this government's thinking. And like I said, we're going to post on our after our podcast. I want to post this where it is, this Finland project, so that people can take a look at it and make their own decisions. I honestly feel like we're getting back. I think it's going to happen eventually. Getting back to people first. I think people are just tired of the same old, and saying, wait a minute, if there's solutions out there, why are we not looking at them to help homelessness? Right. Or like you said, with when folks age and they're going into homes, it's simple stuff to fix. And I think just starting with one small thing like that and fixing it, it gives us hope, right? It shows us that we can do these things as a community, as a province, as a country.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm excited to go back to Queen's Park. I love being in the riding, and it's been an extended stretch of being in the riding. I mean, we should have gone back to Queen's Park in September. We know why the Premier waited until October, because he was toying with the idea probably in June whether or not he was going to go to the polls. There's still the idea that we could go back to Queen's Park October 21st, and he goes down the hall to the Lieutenant Governor's office and the writ is dropped. There is still that possibility. He's trying to beat something. He wants to get to the polls to beat something. And there's a few different things he's trying to beat. Yeah. But I am excited to go back, because there are a number of things that these guys need to be held accountable for. And, but it's going to be a tight run at Queen's Park between October 21st and, middle of December, when we break for Christmas. 6 weeks? There's a Constit week in there. We always have a Constit week during Remembrance Day. So that week will be spent in the riding. So we have 5 or 6 weeks where we can actually try to hold this government to account before Christmas. And there's a lot of stuff that's going to, kind of be, let's just say I'm trying to prioritize right now what I'm going to do within those 5 to 6 weeks. And it's tough, because I have a list this long. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Not this long. It's this long. So what do I try to accomplish within those 5 to 6 weeks? It's just, it's designed purposefully, so that they're not really held to account for too long, and they'll get out there when things start getting really hot in the kitchen.
Is there any big bills they're trying to pass quickly when they go back that you're hearing about? Is there anything we should be aware of?
I can't think of anything right off the top of my head. I'm sure that they'll be talking about their tunnel.
Oh, yeah, we better bring up the tunnel.
There was another bill, but I can't remember what it was. Can't remember what the other one was. There was something else.
I can't remember. I was being rude there. Sorry. I shouldn't laugh at a tunnel. I mean, anything that'll help traffic. But I think you want to look at multiple ways, maybe before you build a tunnel.
I don't know. I'm half thinking that on the 21st, I'll take a shovel and ask if we're going to have a corporate fitness program of helping to dig.
Bobbi. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if that's a good move, for Sunshine. Keep up the good work. I mean, I know you gotta get going, and I'm holding you up. But I do appreciate you taking the time to do this, and thank you for listening to my ramblings about homelessness, because it, sometimes, I think a lot of us feel no one's listening. Mm-hmm. Like I think, like you've talked about this, and I always kind of build this sheet of questions for you and sort of say, hey, what about this? And I think that's part of the problem right now. I think people just feel frustrated that no one's hearing them.
It's true. Yeah. And I hear that. I've been hearing that the past few days at the fairs. People they're downtrodden, and for the most part, people do just want to be heard. I mean, it's one of the things that I continually talk to my staff about is, I get it. It's frustrating when people call and they're upset and they yell at you, but there's a reason they're upset, right? And I get it. And we just have to be compassionate, and we have to listen, and we have to try and guide them in the right place. And that's why my list is so long of things I want to accomplish, because, the issues that are important to people are many, and what may not be important to one person is very, very important to the other. So I don't know, and people don't feel that they're being heard. And I see some of the bad behavior at Queen's Park. I see some of the bad behavior in politics in general, local, provincial, federally. And, it's that behavior that demonstrates why the electorate is so cynical with government, why they're so cynical with politicians, why there's voter apathy. And, we got to change that.
And I'll be remiss if I didn't mention this, because one of the other issues that is cropping up again is daycare space.
Yes, I wrote about that last week.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, I had that written down on my end of my notes, because that was another one that I think is just, it's been totally messed up for years, unfortunately. But
it's absolutely, that's a huge issue. So, you have a premier who's yelling at people to go to work. I have so many families who have come to me who want to go to work, but there's nobody to watch their kids.
Right.
And gone are the days where grandma and grandpa can watch them, because grandma and grandpa are still working.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Have bills to pay, right? Like, so, there's a huge shortage in this $10 a day daycare. I know that there were a number of providers locally who came to me and said, "Oh, I'm really suspicious of this. I don't think that we're going to actually get involved in this." So, there's a number of angles here, but the government has got to address this daycare issue, because they want people working. Well, people have got to have a place to take their kids while they're working.
And again, I see a subsidy here. I think it's an easy issue to start helping folks being able to afford daycares.
Yeah.
And we're the other thing that we don't even talk about on this subject, and it's important, is we're facing a huge shortage of ECEs.
Right. So start paying people what they're worth.
Right.
And, I get it that, we've got to have, you can't pay everyone the same in this province for different jobs. But I go back to when I talk about home care, when I was sitting on committee and we were dissecting the Convenient Care at Home Act. A tree cannot stand if its roots are rotten. Yeah. And the roots of these systems are employees. They are workers. And if you don't pay people who are working in daycare, if you don't pay people who are working in the community in home care, if you don't pay them a competitive wage, they're going to go work somewhere else. It doesn't matter what they're trained to do. They're going to go where they can actually pay the bills better. And
we're losing passionate people in that field that want to be in that, that want to do that job, that enjoy that job, that find that's their life's work, and they can't afford to work at the job they want to be at.
Mhm.
Like it kind of breaks my heart a little bit because again, here we go back to how important it is to get that early start properly.
Yeah,
Right?
that's
We're right back where we started this whole conversation today, which is,
invest
wow,
in our
we actually
immune
pulled that off. I can't believe that. That's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
we kind of quit this podcast and then we went back into it.
I know. I every time I do that to you, don't I? Every month I'm like, you're like, oh, I'm done with this guy finally, and then I'm like, hey, how about this one? Let me lob another grenade into the. Sorry.
I do want to say, like you were saying, like, what do you think is going to be going on at Queen's Park? Like, I suspect that this government is going to continue to talk about the carbon tax,
Oh
even
yeah,
though that's a federal issue. And I don't agree with the carbon tax. So anyone listening, it is making life more expensive for everyone right now. But this province, nobody has told me that we can't follow in the footsteps of Scott Moe. So stop collecting the carbon tax for Justin Trudeau on home heating in this province and make life more affordable for Ontario families, or stop talking about it at Queen's Park and start talking about the real issues that we can deal with in Ontario.
there it is, folks. Bobbi Ann Brady, MPP, Haldimand Norfolk. That was our podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care, Bobbi.
Thanks, Dave.